Hello.
All
Welcome
right.
to Kernels of Truth, brought to you by Progress Kentucky. Thanks so much for joining us this week. I think it's a pretty good show. I think it's a whiz-bang show. We're going to bring you some political news, Kentucky political news from Frankfort, touching down on some really just dirty abortion prosecution efforts from former AG Dan Cameron. We got some really shocking, horrible domestic violence stories that are prompting, I think, more awareness and engagement from our governor, certainly. Then we are going to meet up with Zack Hall, who is running for the 84th House District. Hear about his candidacy in the campaign corner. Then really, really excited to be sharing an interview with Josh Cowen. He's a professor of education at Michigan State University. Although he actually did spend some important time at UK earlier in his academic career. Go Blue. Most importantly, he's the author of The Privateers, How Billionaires Created a Culture War and Sold School Vouchers. It's an incredibly instructive book as we consider Amendment 2. Then we're going to wrap up with an urgent call to action, which I hope you all take advantage of. But first, are you ready to help turn Kentucky purple? I know you are. I know you're here because really, out of literally billions of websites, you're here at this one. And however, whatever platform you're interacting with us at. And that can't be just happenstance. We are sure you sought us out because you want to make Kentucky a bit better, right? You agree that Kentucky deserves better than Mitch McConnell, than Jamie Comer, than Big Bang Sandy Barr, that GOP supermajority in the General Assembly, which time and again block our governor from moving Kentucky forward. But, despite the challenges, we've got some highlights, right? We got a decent highlight reel for Kentucky elections over the past few years. Obviously, we reelected Andy. That was a big one. We rejected Amendment 2, Classic Amendment 2, to keep abortion protections in our state constitution for all the good that did us. We can get things done in this state when we come together, but it's clear there's lots of work to do if we want better electoral outcomes for our Commonwealth. Unless you want your tax dollars siphoned away from public schools and sent to unaccountable religious schools or just kicked back to rich folks, in which case just sit there and listen to us, rail against the political status quo. If you want to change the political status quo, between now and this November, 37 short days from now, we're going to be working hard to make that happen. We hope you'll support Progress Kentucky in our campaign for a more compassionate Commonwealth. Please make a contribution right now. We got a secure Act Blue website, Act Blue to help turn Kentucky purple because we're bright red now and we got some work to do. $5, $50, $500. It all adds up and it'll all go to work between now and November 5th. So help us out, folks. All right. Let's check in with our co-hosts. I want to see who's here, where they are, and maybe what they're protesting today. So if you also would like to take part, put your comments in the chat. What are you protesting? We want to hear about it. So I'm Aaron, coming to you today from lovely Smoky Mountains on the Tennessee side. I was a little scared off on the North Carolina side because of the hurricane impacts. But taking a little bit of a break from Lexington, coming to you from the Smokies. And my protest sign says, "Don't listen to Rand's lies. Vouchers don't work. Fund public education." I think I could get that all in one sign. Kimberly, what do you think?
I think that I'm going to have to turn my camera off.
Uh-oh.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. For sure.
It's not doing too good.
Yeah, you're getting a little herky jerky. You're freezing up. All right. Well, we know what you look like.
Well, guess what? My protest sign says today that I did buy some new internet equipment that I'm going to be hooking up today just because of Kernels of Truth. Yay! My protest sign says today, "Let's all work together."
Sounds so nice. Let's work. Let's do it. Who doesn't want to work together? You sound like, Tim Walz and JD Vance last night at that VP debate. There's just so much common ground here, people. Let's just work together. All right. Well, thank you for that, wonderful imagery. And we got another co-host, Dr. Clardy. Are you there?
Yes, I am, from Murray, Kentucky, and broadcasting from Murray State University. Go Racers. My protest sign says to JD Vance, "You be lying." No, this is what I mean by this. He stood there in that debate last night with Tim Walz and gave Donald Trump credit for saving Obamacare when it was really John McCain. He denied the fact that he was behind the abortion ban and supported it, even though we have him on record and on tape. Kentucky, stop voting against your self-interest. Look at this ticket. These folks are up to no good. And if Jack Smith's new evidence against former President Trump has any legs to stand by, Kentuckians, you have a major decision to make. Vote blue, vote Harris Walls. Let's keep our country free.
Nice. I like it. Yeah, a lot of lies. A lot of lies in that debate last night for sure. You know, I like to make jokes about low stakes, and I feel like anyone who gets nervous about coming on our podcast, I'm like, hey guys, it's kind of low stakes. I don't think you need to be too worried. I would say that the Veep debate, certainly not as low stakes as our podcast, but pretty low stakes. Like I don't think there's very many folks besides like hardened political junkies like ourselves who are paying that close of attention. And I don't know that there's that many people who are making decisions based on the Veep debate. What do they say? We're pretty calcified as an electorate, right? There's the folks who are swingable. There's not very many of them, and they probably don't watch the Veep debate. They might get a good clip from a random TikTok or reel that they stumble across unintentionally, but but yeah, he lied with impunity. Good God. And then when he was called out and he whined about it, oh man, I was told there would be no fact checking.
Only in Trump world. Only in Trump world.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then Nate, of course, our fearless producer, his protest sign says Amendment 2 has got to go. And I'm with you on that one for sure. All right. So let's do news of the week because we got a lot of good content to bring you. Let's jump right into it. News of the week. I think we've got the first story is coming to us from the faceless Kimberly about really, some shocking violence that, prompted, I think, some important commemoration. So Kimberly, what do you got for us?
You all going to stop talking about me and my internet service because after I hook up this T-Mobile system, we're not going to have any more problems. So everybody can just look at my AKA. We were founded in 1908, known as Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority. Also, the sorority of Madam Vice President Kamala Harris. So we want to talk about domestic violence right now. And this is also something that's very dear to Vice President Harris and Walz, as well as our governor. Domestic violence did go up during the pandemic, but it went down somewhat. And I think that's because of stressors and different things of this nature. But there was an incident that happened and kind of spurred the governor into action by the tragic shooting of a domestic violence victim, Erica Riley, who was shot at the Hardin County Courthouse in August by her partner, who she was seeking a protective order from, as he lay in wait, also shooting her mother. It seems like a pretty clear example of why we need red flag laws, more virtual court hearings, but our state absolutely needs more gun safety measures, as all states do with this particular situation that's going on in the world today. But I do have a few stats that I would like to go over with everyone. It's pretty sobering, so to speak. It's so sobering that I didn't even have a hemp cigarette today. But the current social norm is like it's always been, basically, to be silent because the victim feels guilty, like it's something they did, or they feel stupid because they made the decision to be with that particular person. And I know that from personal experience because back in the 90s, an ex-boyfriend broke into my house and he stabbed me repeatedly. And also he, raped me. So some of these stats I'm going to give you. And these come from 2022, and about half of the Kentucky women, meaning 45.3%, and around 35.5% of the men had experienced intimate partner violence or the threat of it in their lifetimes. In 2023, that number has decreased to 44.5% of women and 32.9% of men. So it's gone down some. And across the state in 2024, the Zero V programs provided emergency shelter to 2,788 people, including 1,120 children, and provided 336,145 total services. So our wonderful governor, and that would be Andy Beshear, he stated this. He says, in Kentucky, and he meant this too, ladies and gentlemen, he was not playing around, okay? That's why we love him. He does not play around. He said, in Kentucky, we don't tolerate domestic violence. It is every single one of our obligations to say something when we see it, to get over that thought that's in private. And he is so very true. And I like to piggyback on the governor and also say, use your phones to call the police when you see domestic happenings out in public. People don't even think about calling 911 first. They get their phones out and see that person brutally harmed or even, murked. I have to be careful because YouTube is very, very sensitive. So we don't want to say certain words. But we just have a great governor, and this is Domestic Violence Month. So, if you know of anyone, give them the call line of the domestic violence hotline. I don't have that number right on me, but I'll have it before the end of the show for you. And if you see something, do something. It is all of our responsibilities. Back to you, Aaron.
Yeah. Wow. Well, hey, Kimberly, thank you for your strength and sharing your story. And I'm just sorry that you've gone through that. And obviously, it's a very prevalent problem. I saw some stuff from Everytown that says that access to a gun makes it 5 times more likely an abusive partner will kill his female victim. Nearly 1 million women alive today have had a gun used against them by an intimate partner. Lots of folks not with us, not alive today. It really, the access to guns really is a problem. And clearly folks like this who, they were seeking a protective order, just goes to show that we need to be more proactive for sure. All right. So we got another story we really want to cover, but we do need to get to our first interview of the evening pretty quickly. So Dr. Clardy, tell us what kind of dirty deals Dan Cameron was up to while he was the AG.
If you didn't like Daniel Cameron because of the Breonna Taylor case, you're really not going to like him because of this. He actually went after 2 University of Louisville physicians in a legal battle to take them down for performing legal abortions. He was going to pursue a criminal investigation against 2 doctors over the question of abortion before Roe versus Wade was turned over. And what's so unusual about this case is that this was filed back in June of last year. The Kentucky Lantern is reporting this. This story is just coming out. I have said this time and again. I do not understand what it is about the right and their obsession about controlling a woman's right to choose and what it is about prosecuting doctors for providing health care. I don't get it. I mean, rhetorically, I do get it, but it's disgusting, and we really, really seriously need to rethink our priorities in this Commonwealth by keeping people like that out of office.
Yeah, what a filthy individual. So this is when abortion was legal?
Yeah, before
after these doctors, because they were also affiliated with a public university, and so the argument was, they're using public dollars to provide abortions, even though they were actually, for that service, they were paid by the private clinic. Really just horrible fishing exhibition, just trying to do whatever he can to vilify the folks who provide that critical healthcare service. Of course, you don't have to worry about that now. We don't have it in Kentucky. And really is, on that front, it was heartened to hear Georgia, their Supreme Court say, oh yeah, no, there's a right to an abortion and we're going to impose it. I wish our Supreme Court would, take up the issue. Our voters clearly have spoken about having a right to abortion in our state constitution, but that has not freed up the Supreme Court to actually do anything useful, right? I think they've been stalled out on a standing issue. Like they couldn't find people who had standing to sue about our abortion law, which anti-abortion laws, which like, well, women who who might become pregnant, it seems like they folks should have standing. I'm not a lawyer, but
Oh, it's coming. It's coming. Best believe it's coming.
Yeah. So
I just wish he'd been this judicious when it came to Breonna Taylor's life.
Well, I will say, that the DOJ, as far as those two officers, they have been indicted. And that's on a federal level, since we couldn't do what was right here in the state of Kentucky. But I also want to say this as well. I'm just going to say what the famous comedian Cat Williams said, okay?
Oh, no.
He said in 2024, everything's going to be exposed, and it don't matter who you is. Remember, he said it don't matter who you is. You can be Diddy, you can be Trump, you can be whoever you want to be. It's going to come out in 2024. So it's come out now about Daniel wannabe, used to be, never been Black Cameron.
The liar Dan Cameron. Hey, on the abortion issue, that's pretty heated. On the abortion issue, and I know like we're not really covering it because it's not really a Kentucky issue, but did everyone hear Tim Walz, the Veep candidate, mention our friend Hadley, friend of the show, Hadley Duvall, during the Veep debate? That was pretty. That woman is just what a strong survivor who's done such important work to elevate the importance of stories like hers. So what a badass. All right, so I think we're ready to go. I think we need to now move into our interview, our first interview. We're doing Campaign Corner. Really excited to have with us former teacher Zack Hall, who is running for the 84th State House District. This is one of those districts, and folks recall, if they've been paying attention, way back in the day, we did a quick analysis and looked at which House districts Andy won and by how much, and who was actually representing those districts. And this is one of the ones we highlighted as a potential, a good place to have a great candidate, because it's a district that Andy did very well in, and theoretically, the folks who voted for Andy should also want to support a representative who wants to support Andy, and not one of these Republicans who blocks every single thing that Andy tries to do. So Zack Hall, we're going to find out from Zack Hall right now if he's one of those candidates. Zack, how are you doing this evening? Thank you so much for joining us and taking a minute off the campaign trail to tell us about you, your race, and your district. How are you?
Hey, I cannot hear Aaron or Brian. I can hear Kimberly.
Okay.
But for some reason, I thought it might have been because I was in the waiting room, but I can't hear Aaron or Brian.
Hey, so Kimberly, I guess you're doing this interview.
But I can hear I can hear you, Kimberly.
Well, that's because I'm the best of the best on the show. No, I'm just playing with you. However, I will say this. Tell us a little bit about what are some of the things that you would like to take care of when you win. We're going to just say you won already. Okay, we're going to put that out there in the atmosphere. And I understand about Amendment 2. If you would like to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I am a former public school teacher. My wife is a former public school teacher, and funding public education is my top priority, bottom line. Making sure our teachers are getting the pay they deserve, and making sure that our students in our public school classrooms have resources that put them in the best position possible to succeed. And then aside from that, we also want to prioritize investment in infrastructure. And when people hear infrastructure, a lot of times they think of roads and bridges, and that's a big part of it. But in the 21st century, that includes things like making sure that we have affordable, accessible broadband in rural parts of the state, making sure that our water systems, which in many parts of our state are 100 years old or more, that we have clean, reliable water systems for our people. That's the least that we can do in the greatest country in the world. And then also putting an investment in community development. I live in Eastern Kentucky. I've lived here my whole life. And in the floods of 21 and 22, we lost a lot of our infrastructure, a lot of housing. We had um, a housing crisis before the flood, and it was only exacerbated after. So it put us in a really hard position to make sure that we can attract people to our area who want to move here, and made it harder for people who are graduating high school and college to come back to their home. So making sure that we're investing in those three fields is top priority for me.
Exactly. And this is what exactly your constituency, basically all of us are concerned about. But how about you tell us a little bit more, more about the infrastructure? I can't get my words out
Yeah. So in
today.
Eastern Kentucky, this district in the 84th district.
Hel-
Oh, I'm sorry. You cut out for a second, so I didn't know if you were done asking.
Oh, yes, I was. Uh-huh.
Okay. So in Eastern Kentucky, this district is Perry County, Breathitt County, and Owsley County. Owsley County is one of the poorest counties in the country, and Breathitt County is right there across the board in the state as far as one of the poorest counties. And we have not invested in our infrastructure the way that we should have been. Perry County and Breathitt County historically had economies that were powered by the coal industry. And the coal industry is on its way out. It's a thing of the past, and we have not diversified. And when the coal industry was here, we thought that it was going to be good times the whole time, and we didn't think about making investments for the future. So it's really put us in a bad position now. And every winter, it's not a matter of if your water freezes and goes off. It's a matter of when. And when that happens and our pipes burst, a lot of times we're forced to put bandages on a problem that we should really be proactive in fixing. And it makes things worse further on down the road. And after the flood in 22, especially, all three counties being affected, a lot of our water lines were washed out, and then they were replaced with Band-Aids. And then this past winter, we saw the effects of that. So making sure that our infrastructure, not only our water systems, but our internet as well is up to date for the 21st century. It's not just for the people that live here. That's obviously top priority, but it also has a direct impact on businesses that are looking to come to the area. I've been in meetings where we've had to tell businesses that we don't have the water capacity or the internet capacity that they need to locate here. And we've lost jobs because of that.
So, Representative Hall, hopefully, what this is something that's really on a lot of Americans' minds, especially here in Kentucky. You know about the strike with the 45,000 workers on those ports, and you're hearing a lot of things on social media, especially TikTok, about stocking up, doing all these kind of things. They've also talked about each day the country loses $5 billion. And I was in the midst of researching how much our state loses from the products that we have right here in Kentucky. If you were a representative right now, what would you say to your constituency? What would you say about this situation that doesn't seem like one today, but can quickly turn left in the next 3 to 4 days?
Yeah, I would say that it's important to stand with our workers. Bottom line, our workers control our economy, and I don't think that we realize that enough. It's not just union workers; it's workers all across the country, and making sure that we are pushing for fair wages, for fair working conditions, is should be top of mind. In Kentucky, one of our largest industries is the bourbon industry, and that's just not an industry that makes its money here in the U.S., but we export a lot of those goods. And when those ports are stopped up, workers and business owners here in Kentucky are losing a lot of money each day.
So, I guess what I was really asking, just very, very quickly, we have about a couple of minutes left, is the situation is as it is right now. And all of us are going to have to deal with this situation until the powers that be do something or they can negotiate something. And it's really not about the money. It's about the AI and automated systems that they want to replace the workers with. So just as the situation stands right now, what would you tell your constituency? That it's going on right now? Would you tell them, or would you be gathering up some type of pantry for your constituency? Would you be working with other organizations? Would you tell them to, I've got your back as much as I possibly can? What would you do? Very quickly, we have about 2 minutes.
Yeah. So in times like this, where we're facing uncertainty or maybe a shortage, it's important to take care of ourselves, but also take care of our neighbors. So making sure that we are stocked up on the essentials that we need, but also if we have a little bit extra, to make sure that we're asking our neighbor if they're okay and if they need some more. And it's times like this that lead to uncertainty. We saw it during the COVID pandemic. And we're seeing it now with this, that it's important that we do have at least a little bit in the pantry to get us through. And that if you need help, contact, I'm not an elected official yet. I hope to be, but if there's anything that I can do to help you, always reach out. I will do everything that I can to help each and every person that I consider my neighbor, no matter if I'm in office or not. And I think that's the mindset that we as Kentuckians generally have, and it makes Kentucky the greatest place in the world to live.
Well, I see Mr. Aaron has a question for you. Mm-hmm. And the question that he's asking is, how do you think Governor Beshear has been doing? And would you go to Frankfort looking to work with Andy or trying to block his efforts as your opponent largely has?
Yeah, so Andy's great. I received his endorsement a couple of weeks ago. I think he has been a champion for the working class, for public education. Those are two sectors that I will always stand with. And I think that he's been a big help to Eastern Kentucky. For historically, Eastern Kentucky gets left out a lot when it comes to state level politics, but he's been present. So I can't say enough good things about the governor, and I look forward to working with him and helping him in any way that we can.
Well, I would vote for you if I was in your area, Zach. Seriously, I really, really would, because you know what got to me and what is getting to everyone else that listens to this or is looking at this is you said, even though you're not in office, you're willing to help. So that means your heart is good. And that's what we love to hear. So if everybody wants to get with Mr. Zack Hall, they can send some money. That's always very, very important in these races. And Zack4ky.com, Zack4ky.com. So we really appreciate you being with us this evening. Just going to call it out, Representative Hall. Okay, that sounds good, doesn't it? So we really appreciate you being on here, and I know you'll be coming back. I know that. I'm looking at Aaron's face. He's like, yeah, he's coming back. He's coming back.
Absolutely. Thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it. It was great to meet all of you all, and I'll come back anytime you have me, win or lose.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Have a good evening, Zach.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good one.
That's what we need, man. More servant leaders for sure. Great to hear from Zach. We wish him all the luck on the campaign trail. He stepped out of a fundraiser to come and talk with us. Well, let's make it worth his while, folks. If you have a minute, go to his website, make a donation. It doesn't have to be big, but anything you can do to help him out. He's the type of candidate we need to see more of in the legislature, and definitely somebody who's opposed to Amendment 2, working hard to support public education, which, the opponents are lining up right now. And speaking of, we're very, very excited to be bringing you now an interview we did earlier in the week with Josh Cowen, who's the author of The Privateers, How Billionaires Created a Culture War and Sold School Vouchers. This is an important and instructive book about this really important legislative decision we're going to be making as voters on November 5th about Amendment 2. So yeah, can we go ahead and roll the interview? All right, so super excited about this week's guest. We have with us Josh Cowen, who's a professor of education at education policy at Michigan State University. He is a nationally recognized expert and writer on topics related to school choice, teachers, and teaching. policy analysis, and education politics. He has studied school vouchers, school accountability, charter schools, and parental decision-making as part of major research teams in Louisiana, Michigan, and Wisconsin. His writing on school vouchers, culture wars, and other current events has appeared in major media outlets ranging from Slate to Time Magazine. And most excitingly, he has written this book. So we have got The Privateers, How Billionaires Created a Culture War and Sold School Vouchers. I ran across reference to the book in the Lexington paper, and it seemed highly appropriate for our conversations about what's happening with Amendment 2. So I reached out, and he's been generous enough with his time and his books to send the books to us so we could read them, and then his time so he could join us this week. So Josh, thank you so much for joining us. And how are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Doing great. Good to see you guys, and let's get into it.
Yeah. So you have written this book. I think you've got a really unique perspective on it because you actually were a researcher on voucher programs. So, bringing that academic attention to voucher programs. And then, what kind of prompted you to go from analyzing the programs to writing about them?
Yeah, thanks. Well, so over the last 20 years, vouchers have sort of moved from the trial phase of sort of these small programs, a few hundred kids participating, to thousands and thousands of children across the country, including next door to you guys, both in Indiana and Ohio. And all of those old pilot programs had some form of evaluation, stuff that I was a part of, studying these things, often in some cases with some pro-voucher researchers, as I talk about in the book. But over the last decade, something happened. So as these programs grew to thousands of children, the results started to get terrible, and in fact got to be as negative as we've ever seen on any question in the education research literature for kids who transferred from public to private school using a voucher. And they still are here, and we're still having these conversations. In fact, 24 voucher schemes have passed over the last couple of years. You guys are dealing with this effort, Amendment 2 in Kentucky. And so the sort of central question that I set out to answer in the book was, okay, if we know these things are terrible for kids and families, why are we still having this conversation? Why are these things spreading like wildfire? And the answer is that it's part of this larger political moment we're in, culture wars and Christian nationalism.
Yeah, and I'll throw it to Dr. Clardy in just a second, but I just want to underscore something you just kind of glossed over in your intro to this whole book. These don't work. They do not bring about better educational outcomes for students.
So 70% or so of voucher users were already in private school to begin with. So this is a really important thing to know. If Amendment 2 passed, most of the beneficiaries of these things and most of the kids using those dollars would already be in private schools, places like Louisville and Jefferson County, places like Covington, places like Lexington, but not really helping anyone in sort of places that there aren't private schools. For the 30% or so of kids who do transfer from public to private school, those are the kids that we actually do see those catastrophic academic declines. It's not about hope and opportunity and academic progress for those kids. What they have access to are what I call subprime providers. So these are the financially distressed private schools that have a few openings. They have a few openings because they're not particularly good and they want more money and they want space to try to kind of pull themselves up. And so they admit kids with the voucher to transfer. And unfortunately, they fail to deliver on what's being promised.
Yeah, that's funny because that doesn't show up in any of these ads we're seeing. That's not being shared.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
No, imagine that.
But we are seeing a lot of ads, and so it seems like it's a very well-funded effort. Your book does a really good job of like laying out some of the funders. So the DeVos family, Betsy DeVos and her brother, like big, huge foundations. Heritage Foundation, which get a bit of a mention at the end of the epilogue of your book, talking about Project 2025, which has been very much brought into the conversation, probably since you initially set out to write the book. I don't think that was part of the conversation, but now it seems like now vouchers are kind of in that conversation about what would happen under a Trump administration. But yeah,
Right.
it does seem like it's so if they don't really work, right? Why are they being funded to such a crazy degree by these like right-wing foundations and that whole ecosystem?
Well, let's start with Betsy DeVos. So Betsy DeVos has long pushed for vouchers, long put her name and money behind these things. Betsy DeVos has said publicly many times, she's a public figure, that she laments the role that public schools play in American communities. She wants churches to go back and play what she sees as replace public schools as centers of community. Most folks, I think, who are regular churchgoers like myself and others might dispute that churches aren't part of communities, but in Betsy DeVos's view, public schools have taken the role that churches should have. She wants to use school vouchers. She calls it school choice, but she wants it to use this to what she says is advance God's kingdom here on earth. And so that's sort of one really important kind of motivation we should take seriously. That's what she's trying to do with these schemes.
Excellent. Good to know. Dr. Clardy. Dr. Clardy, do you have a question for Josh?
Well, Josh, I have a lot of us know Milton Friedman from his pioneering work in economics, especially monetary policy when he taught at the University of Chicago. But a lot of people aren't familiar with his role in championing vouchers in the aftermath of Brown versus Board of Education. You took us through that narrative in the book. Could you kind of flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah, so Milton Friedman's a conservative economist, again, at the University of Chicago, as you said, or was. And in 1955, published an essay. He's a young 42-year-old economist at the time, published an essay called The Role of Government in Education. 1955, just a few months after Brown versus Board, he had been working on this voucher idea, the idea of sort of getting what he saw as government out of education entirely, just give parents a voucher, send them on their way. To do whatever they wanted, public, private, they could do whatever. But writing at that time couldn't avoid the implications of Brown versus Board. And we now know from archival work, Dr. Nancy McLean at Duke University and others have sort of shown that Friedman's editors at that time of that essay pressed him pretty hard to respond to Brown. And he sort of said, this could be used by parents who wanted to avoid racial integration. It could be used for parents. I don't want to use the language here on air, but I put it in the book sort of explicitly saying people could find racially isolated schools if they wanted to. That was the whole point. And parents had the right to find racially segregated schools if they wanted to, and vouchers could help with that. There's a bit of a debate among sort of the Friedman's reputation, I think, has kind of declined a little bit as it's become clear that Friedman also later in his career advised the Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet, who also, by the way, implemented a voucher scheme in the 70s. Friedman won a Nobel Prize. He advised Ronald Reagan. There's a bit of a debate about whether or not Friedman himself was a segregationist. That, to me, I find that sort of irrelevant to today. What is important is that segregationists sure liked Friedman's idea and did immediately see it as a way to avoid the implications of Brown. And so southern states across the country actually introduced voucher systems. A few passed. In one state, Texas, didn't pass it, but that would have required parents to actually sign an affidavit saying they were applying for a voucher specifically because they disliked racial integration. But that was kind of the origin of the voucher movement. And then it took till 1990 to kind of really get a real modern voucher system off the ground. That was in Milwaukee. But absolutely, the godfather of today's voucher systems was writing and proposing this idea in the wake of Brown, and segregationists latched onto the idea.
And then there's another intellectual, a couple of them actually, that really leapt out at me as I was reading the book, Paul Peterson at Harvard University. Yeah. And of course, the very infamous Charles Murray, the author of the Bell Curve that came out some 30 years ago. Tell us a little bit about Peterson's role and how is it that he ended up in a Supreme Court opinion?
Well, so there's a number of conservative scholars, Peterson being one. He had made his name pushing for welfare reform before vouchers. He had written a book called Welfare Magnets, suggesting that states like Wisconsin that had more generous social welfare packages would draw poorer people to them. And he sort of argued this wasn't necessarily a good thing. But the Peters is just a name. The bigger picture piece is that a number of billionaire-backed conservative philanthropy. This is where the Charles Murray bell curve comes into the story briefly. Is groups of right-wing funders, the Bradley Foundation based in Milwaukee, the Olin Foundation, which is now defunct and sort of folded into Bradley, DeVos affiliated groups at that time, the Charles Koch affiliated groups at that time, saw very much as they do today, saw the American professoriate, the academy, think tanks in DC as hostile to conservative ideas. And what they wanted to do was create what they called a beachhead for a counterintelligentsia and assemble what they called soldier scholars to push conservative ideas both in the academy, in public policy, and in major think tanks, which they had to help start and found. So Vouchers actually kind of got caught up in that early kind of counterintelligentsia movement, trying to kind of establish evidence as they saw it on behalf of right-wing ideas, and Vouchers being one of the first views of that. And what I say in the book, what I show, and what's happening now is that wasn't just creating ideas for ideas' sake or creating think tanks just to kind of have a bunch of guys sit around, smoke pipes, and talk about ideas. They very much targeted these efforts toward legislation, toward litigation, to create constitutional arguments, and to create and bombard individual states with data. You guys are getting bombarded right now by the descendants of these original beachhead counterintelligentsia soldier scholars of facts and figures. And Bluegrass Institute's part of this. Let's look at Florida or Arizona, and a lot of it's just kind of like stuff that gets dumped into the ecosystem to package and to kind of diminish what we know from independent researchers is really horrific effects of these programs on kids and families.
It really is interesting, right? So these things began like, these failing public schools, let's give people better educational outcomes. And a lot of these programs were developed with some sense of math happening on the back end of show what was happening to the students. And then, of course, once that, became to show these horrible results, that seemed to be less important. And now they're moving forward just with it as a kind of ideology unto itself. Right. And right. You write in your book, and this just hit me hard. You just distilled it down in a way that was just unavoidably, really outrageous. The school voucher program is the parents' rights movement, and the parents' rights movement is religious nationalism. Pretty unequivocal and pretty, just a frank assessment of what's happening right now with Amendment 2 in Kentucky.
Yeah. Well, you can't, it's not that social science evidence has always informed public policy across every question. But what has happened usually is when something is really, really causing big problems for the intended recipients, whether it's kids or it's, when you learn that tobacco is linked to lung cancer, or when you learn that an analogy I use in the book is that opiates were becoming addictive, and Purdue Pharma was marketing a faulty product. Like we do start to see data change the conversation, change the narrative, and stop these things in their tracks. That didn't happen with vouchers. In fact, all this evidence that's accumulated over the last 10 years that vouchers they're just a subsidy for kids who are already in private school, usually wealthier, and for those who weren't in private school, they suffer catastrophic academic consequences. You don't actually get a lot of straightforward, unambiguous data like that when you evaluate these types of public programs. And so there's only, in my view, the reason that we're still here, the reason there's an Amendment 2, the reason there's a ballot initiative in Colorado on the same day, the reason there's one in Nebraska on the same day, the reason that 24 states have passed or expanded vouchers in the last 2 years, the reason that 13 states have universal systems, regardless of income, just to primarily benefit those kids already in private school, is that this is an ideological push. It's related to the same reason we're having conversations. We just passed National Book Ban Week last week, talking about book bans again, talking about what's happening to LGBTQ kids in public schools, talking about, by the way, what schools teach on the history of race. We mentioned Friedman and integration. You got Ron DeSantis down in Florida, signed what's right now the nation's biggest voucher scheme. Within weeks of doing that, was defending a public school curriculum put forward by the state that suggested that slavery had actually economic benefits for enslaved people. I mean, it's and then doubled down on it a couple of weeks later when pressed to clarify his remarks. So, I mean, this is the world that we're actually living in, working in right now. And I think that these are the forces in politics that sort of saved the voucher movement, as I say in the book. Coming on the heels, those negative results I mentioned, they started trickling out the first few months of the Trump presidency, and I don't think there's an accident. We got a guy who literally denied that he lost the election in 2020. If that's where we are as a country, then maybe negative, horrific voucher results are just part and parcel, not taking a back seat to ideology.
Yeah, that's you put it very well there, and it seems very clear that we have got our work cut out for us in terms of telling the story about vouchers here in Kentucky. I'm gonna give it to my co-host just for one moment, but I wanted to touch on one of the big funders for our effort, and one of the big backers right now is so Rand Paul is on the ads for pro Amendment 2. He and his wife are out there talking about this is the biggest civil rights issue for the generation.
Yeah, they've been saying that for a while. Yeah.
We've also seen the Protect Freedom PAC funding a lot of these initiatives. And it's my understanding that one of the key figures in a lot of this funding is, I believe, Jeff Yass.
Jeff Yass
is a TikTok investor, big Rand Paul donor, big into vouchers. Can you tell us a little about him and why he's in this conversation?
Yeah, Yass, big right-wing billionaire, kind of a new player on the billionaire stage here. Big proponent of vouchers in Pennsylvania, where he kind of started his active effort on this. Recently gave $10 million to Greg Abbott's PAC in Texas to try to successfully, as it turned out, primary a bunch of anti-voucher Republicans. The model for all of these guys that DeVos folks pioneered this is vouchers historically have been very unpopular among rural Republicans for the simple reason that there's no private schools in those rural districts. And so the model the last couple of years has been using outside dollars, national billionaire dollars, it's happening in your state, to get rid of hesitant Republicans. Yass joined that party, basically. He did it in Texas. He gave money, but he started in Pennsylvania, and he's now active in Kentucky. You do see these libertarian arguments, the Rand Paul types. The civil rights, calling vouchers the civil rights issue of our time is it's been trotted out for quite a while. Donald Trump first said it a few years ago. This has been something that Betsy DeVos herself has called vouchers many times. So Rand Paul certainly not the first ever to call vouchers civil rights. And there's a bit of a thumbing their nose at the anti-civil rights history of these vouchers systems. And it's also at the same time trying to sort of build off of this general sense among some Christians. Again, I identify as practicing Christian faith, but there are some that would say they're being particularly put upon by this culture, American culture, and that their civil rights are being threatened by not having vouchers. And so a lot of this kind of language is just about kind of trying to muddy the waters around what really is just a tax giveaway for wealthier families in private schools already, and to some extent some academic predatory lending, luring kids away from public schools into some failing subprime private schools. Is really what's going on here.
That's very insightful. Dr. Clardy, final question to you.
Can we get into a little judicial hypotheticals here for a minute?
Sure.
The Zellman case was decided 5-4 back in 2002 when Chief Justice Rink was in power. Given the ideological composition of the court today, would you pretty much say that the margin would be much larger? Would it be 6-3 if Zellman were decided today? And why is that?
Well, good question. So there have been 3 Supreme Court cases since Zellman that have further expanded voucher rights, essentially. The first was in 2017 in Trinity v. Lutheran. The next was 2020 in Espinoza versus Montana Department of Revenue. And the third was Carson v. Macon, which came 3 days before 6 right-wing justices of the Supreme Court rolled back 50 years of reproductive freedom in this country 3 days earlier, and Carson B. making those same 6 right-wing justices further expanded voucher rights. And what I mean by that is Zellman said in 2002, 22 years ago, Zellman said, you can have vouchers. It doesn't create a problem constitutionally, but you can't require kids to take those vouchers and practice faith in those private schools. It's just, you can fund some private schools, but you can't do it in a religious way. Those last 3 court cases more recently that I mentioned have increasingly built a permission structure for vouchers to go to religious education per se. And that's what that last case in Carson 2 years ago did, is it said vouchers can actually go toward religious education, not just religious providers, if you can see the distinction. Betsy DeVos and the Cato Institute, which is founded by Charles Koch, and other big players in this, long term, they want a Supreme Court ruling that says vouchers are mandatory in every state. For complicated jurisprudence, that they argue is essentially you're discriminating against religious families if you don't have vouchers. They're not there yet. They haven't gotten that ruling, but they're getting closer with every term. And you're right, 6-3 is the new 5-4.
Thank you.
That's staggering. They'd be arguing that we have to have vouchers and people have to be funded to go to private religious schools if they choose to. If
you want one, yeah, that's the argument.
So, I mean, I guess in your book, you're kind of like charged to come up with a rallying cry on the other side, and you come up with fund public schools, right? It seems like, pretty indisputable, but also pretty indisputable that these voucher programs lead to reduction of funds for public schools. Is that pretty, because at this point they're arguing, hey, there's no voucher program. We're just giving ourselves constitutional authority to do something along these lines.
Yeah,
right?
That's why they're spending all this money. The same people in Texas, same people in Tennessee, same people in Arkansas and Iowa coming to Kentucky. They don't want vouchers like they just had there. It's all about something more nebulous. No, they do defund public schools. They do it in 2 ways. First, by making it more expensive at the state level to increase funding to public schools. And second, at the district level, long term, as a few kids do peel away and go to private schools, and districts are left with legacy costs for like heating and cooling, buses, teacher salaries, and pensions, and things like that. It's bad news all around financially, and a lot of work gets done on the other side. Those think tanks I mentioned, Bluegrass in your case, sister think tanks. These are all Koch and Bradley organizations, by the way. Goldwater in Arizona, Badger in Wisconsin, Buckeye in Ohio. You see the pattern. They're all the same organizations. They work very hard to say no, vouchers don't defund public schools. And the reason they do is that there's polling that indicates it's a very unpopular proposition. They want to sort of say, no, you can have your cake and eat it too. And no one with a household budget understands that, that doesn't understand that you have to make sacrifices. If you put money in one place, you got to worry about funding the other. And that's not how state budgets work either. You really have, there's no such thing as a free bill. You have to pay for it somehow, and it will eventually come out of public schools. And that's what we've seen elsewhere in every other state.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for taking your time and sharing your book with us. It's The Privateers. It's how billionaires created a culture war and sold school vouchers. Josh Cowen, appreciate the work you've done, the research you've done, the fact that you're sharing this information with people who, really desperately need to know it. I wish we could afford to put you in an ad and blast it around on everyone's sports ball viewing. But this book is great.
Good luck. I'm really watching it closely down there. State means a lot to me, and hope you guys are able to defeat this thing.
Absolutely. Well, with your book, I think we've gotten a little bit more ammunition to do that work. So thanks so much.
Let's hope so.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we are. Yeah. What an interview. What a great, as I say, great resource as we gear up to fight Amendment 2 at the ballot. This is a really, it's an important read. I put a link to Joseph Beth if you want to support local bookshops when you buy it, but you can get the book. Really great information and ammunition in our fight. All right, so we're moving on. We've gone a little bit long, as I knew we would whenever we've got 2 guests and news to cover. But I wanted to just do a quick call to action, and then they'll close this out. So join us. We are we are launching our campaign to fight Amendment 2, to elect folks, specifically folks like Adam Moore, who we've endorsed, to keep Sherilyn Stevenson in Frankfurt with Andy. We've endorsed them both. And we'd like you to join our campaign to win these critical down ballot races to make Kentucky a bit better, a bit kinder, and a bit less in the pocket of right-wing billionaires and their anti-public education agenda, as we've just heard about. We'll be canvassing, we'll be calling, we'll be getting folks informed and ready to vote. Sign up on our form. We've got a Google form you can sign up on to join the cause. Calling, canvassing, do the work to win these elections. Really important for sure. All right, so that's what we've got for you. Kimberly, are you ready to close this out?
Aaron, what a great show tonight. Zack Hall and Josh Cowen, it was amazing. And you guys, Brian, Dr. Clardy, and Aaron, you all did wonderful with that interview.
Thank
you
you
all
so very much.
Keep that,
Appreciate
because
it.
I don't give that compliments too much, okay? But the disclaimer is Progress Kentucky is a nonprofit organization registered with the Kentucky Secretary of State and organized as a 501c4. We are affiliated with the Indivisible Project, the Commonwealth Alliance for Voter Engagement, otherwise known as CAVE, and also proud members of the Forward Kentucky Network. Our goal is to educate, organize, increase voter turnout, and advance a progressive agenda through civic engagement. Next week's show, and we're very excited to be joined by Representative Lindsey Burke, a Lexington area state representative. She's unopposed in November, but we'll be checking in with her to discuss how abortion is on the ballot in Kentucky in November, and why we need to keep the issue in the front of our minds as voters, because we do decide in just 37 days. This production of episode 180 was by our very own Nate Orshan, who also wrote and performed our theme song. You can find more information about Nate at natosongs.com, and that's NATO songs.com. And if you miss our weekly live stream on Facebook or YouTube, audio podcasts and our show notes are always available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcast. If you do listen to the pod, hey, leave us a 5-star review whenever you listen to us. It really helps with the algorithms. I promise it does. And logo and some graphic content was provided by Couchfire Media. So I look forward for everybody to be here at the same time, same place next Wednesday. And everybody, have a great rest of your week. And thank you for joining us.